If you were given the chance to travel through time, which date would you choose? 1347, 1939? No, the most terrifying, darkest, and deadliest year in history was 536. What happened to humanity when the sun set and did not rise for a full 18 months? Do you wonder what happened to humanity when the sun set and did not rise again for 18 months? This was not merely symbolic darkness, but a physical event in which the sky was covered with dust. Modern science explains this phenomenon as a thick layer of ash scattered into the atmosphere by massive volcanic eruptions. This massive disruption in the 6th century was experienced as the world's greatest environmental shock. While empires considered their own political interests, armies were on the move and tensions were rising along the borders. But soon, a terrible event overshadowed the wars, and the entire sky suddenly darkened. It was daytime, but it was never bright. The light faded and lost its brightness. The horizon seemed dull, as if viewed from behind an invisible veil. The seasons in the region became confused and lost their natural flow. This event should not be thought of as merely the legend of a single region. Different witnesses, unaware of each other, recorded the same darkening and the same decrease in brightness. Traces of the atmospheric disturbance are seen today in ice cores. Glacial records and tree trunks carried the silent cry of the past into the present. However, the stories told by the eyes that directly witnessed this terrible catastrophe clearly warned of the impending great destruction. What exactly did Procopius see in the sky? When the Byzantine historian Procopius looked up at the sky, he did not see a normal haze. What he recorded was the sun completely losing its brightness, and this lifeless state spread everywhere as it lasted for a full year. The sun looked just like it does during an eclipse, but it couldn't deliver the life-giving light the world needed. People stared at this huge, dim disk overhead and resigned themselves to their fate. These accounts formed the core of what is now dramatized as the Great Dark Year. The sun had taken on a strange appearance, and this state became so pronounced that it fundamentally disrupted daily life in the ancient world. With the fading of the light, the air temperature dropped instantly. An endless coolness enveloped everything, even in the summer months. This dullness in the sky permanently disrupted people's familiar sense of a safe world. People at that time in history did not know modern climate science, but they saw the results clearly. For communities that noticed that the fields were not warming up and the seeds were not growing strong, the great disaster reached an unbearable point along with hunger. The loss of light's quality was not merely a visual anomaly. It meant the halt of the biological clock and agricultural production that had been running smoothly for thousands of years. Nature, without a sound, cut off humanity's path. The sun was still in its place, but it no longer inspired confidence. It was daytime, but the feeling of daylight had been completely shattered. This global silence went down in history, forcing the statesmen waiting on Italy's dusty roads to take action. How did the dark sky condemn the world to starvation? Records from Cassiodorus on the Italian front provided a clearer account of this great atmospheric disaster. The issue was not merely the color of the sky. It became clear that the sun could no longer cast shadows on earthly bodies. Even the moon appeared dim when full and did not illuminate the nights. The sun lost much of its heat as the seasons lost their order. As the soil cooled, crops froze, and all the fields turned into graveyards. Cassiodorus was not merely describing nature, he was urgently calling for measures to be taken by the public administration. The threat of famine was imminent. This strange anomaly in the sky and the rapid emptying of the granaries plunged the entire state into great distress. The thick fog in the atmosphere soon reflected itself in market prices and the bread on the table. The deterioration in the air also affected the people's tables. Cassiodorus's letters most powerfully documented the link between crisis and collapse. For the people of the ancient world, this was not superstition, but a struggle for survival. They knew what the delay in rain and the prolonged cold spell meant. The weakening of the sun actually meant that the society's main food source was depleted. The massive wheels of civilization began to slow down with the decrease in heat from the sun. Taxes could not be collected, and armies could not be fed. That gray silence spreading from the sky froze everything, even in the majestic palaces of empires. The sky darkened, and so the world slowly drifted into famine. Major upheavals rarely begin with a loud bang. First, the air turns sour, then the crops fail, and then the cries from Syria begin to be heard. How did 18 months of darkness paralyze life? Syrian Michael's records describe the event in terrifying detail. It was recorded that the sun was darkened for 18 months and that only a faint light filtered into the world for a few hours in the morning. Fruits never ripened, and the soil lost its vitality, turning into a pile of dust. This story was the most vivid expression of history's darkest period. Nature cut off the flow of life by preventing living things from feeding. Michael's records show that this atmospheric apocalypse was immediately followed by scenes of mass death and plague. This chain of events took its place in the dark pages of history as a moment of severe rupture for future generations. Some sources mention a whole year, while others speak of 18 months, but the common truth everyone agreed on was the same. The light was no longer the sun they knew. When everything familiar suddenly broke down, the true situation became clear. The horror of the year 536 lay precisely here. The sun was in the sky, but it gave no warmth to anyone. There was daylight, but the reassuring feeling of daytime had officially vanished. The sky no longer seemed reliable, deeply shaking civilization. Today's scientific data confirms that these accounts are not legends, but the human face of a real environmental upheaval. The thinning of the tree trunks emerged as physical evidence of the cold and famine thousands of years ago. This was not just one year of bad weather, but the beginning of a long-term crisis. The first blow had been struck. But the real destruction came with the enemy that followed this darkening of the sky and prepared the collapse of empires. How did the invisible siege drive the world into starvation? Modern research has proven that a chain of massive volcanic eruptions was behind this anomaly. The ash, dust, and particles released into the atmosphere in 536 AD triggered the coldest decade in the last 2,300 years. Summer temperatures dropped by 2.5 degrees. This fluctuation of a few degrees may seem insignificant to the modern world, but for agricultural societies, it directly resulted in mass death. When the crop ripening calendar was disrupted, the risk of frost increased and production collapsed. As the pressure of famine grew, the resilience of societies diminished. What made 536 horrific was that the disaster reached down to food sources and expanded its impact. An army would come and go, or a siege would target only a single city, but an atmospheric disaster knew no boundaries. It struck everyone without knocking on anyone's door. It dried up and devastated the fields, the animals, and the granaries all at once. There was no army to point to as the enemy, no target to shoot arrows at. There was no envoy to negotiate with. People were defeated not by a concrete opponent, but directly by the hazy sky above their heads. The power of empires waned in the face of the sun's weakening. Thrones, laws, and armies became useless. As order broke down, chaos grew. The global siege was swept up in a ruthless silence, governed not by politics, but by nature's own rules. The sky darkened, and the world slowly began to starve. But hunger was only the beginning. Weakening bodies and collapsing logistics networks paved the way for one of history's greatest pandemics, lifting the curtain on disaster. What happened after 536 that caused the dead to pile up again? The Justinian Plague of 541 descended upon this weakened world, already shaken by climate shock. The cooling and famine had left people defenseless. The epidemic remained the bloodiest final chapter of this dark age of calamities. The process that began with the disruption of light was a chain of disasters that spread to the climate, harvests, and economy. The year 536 was horrific in itself, but it also made the crises that followed even more devastating. This year was not an end, but a gateway to true darkness. When it opened, it unleashed freezing cold, endless famine, and epidemics that killed millions. As the color of the sky changed, civilization realized its fate had changed too. One morning you wake up suddenly and see the sun behind a dirty veil. The day progresses, but that life-giving warmth does not come. Weeks turned into months, months into years, but the haze in the sky did not dissipate. The greatest horror was not the world's sudden disappearance, but its gradual descent into uninhabitable conditions. The year 536 showed us how fragile civilization is. This time, it was not kings who determined the course of history, but the ashes rising into the sky. This year was a time when humanity looked up at the sky and felt fear in the most unforgettable way. A day that lost its light and a summer that never warmed up did not leave fear in people's minds, but turned into mass deaths covering the entire earth. What we thought was order is in reality as thin as a single layer of the atmosphere. When that layer is disrupted, empires fall silent, and all that remains is a sky shrouded in mist and a humanity gazing into darkness.